Welcome back to Living Outside the Matrix, the show for rational thinking people who are seeking the truth. I'm your host, Nigel Howitt, and on the show today, it's a great pleasure to be joined once again by researcher Simon Shack and also Patrik Holmqvist, IT specialist. And today we're going to be discussing the second edition of Simon's fantastic book, The TYCHOS, Our Geoaxial Binary Solar System. So, Simon, first of all, to you, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, well, thanks for having us.
And Patrik, thank you so much for joining in too. You're, as the creator of the 3D TYCHOSium. It's great to have you on board as well for your input.
Thank you, Nigel, and thank you for having us on here again. It's a pleasure.
We're going to be discussing this book on the TYCHOS, which is Simon has been researching this, I'm going to call it a model of the solar system, which really lays down the gauntlet of challenge to the conventional model that we've all been raised with and taught all our lives, the heliocentric model, or the Copernican model as it's known. And I want to stress from the outset that this model also completely disproves any notion of a flat Earth. But we have to accept up front, this is a big challenge for anybody who's predisposed to just believe what everybody else says. And I propose to any of you serious truth seekers out there with, a capacity for logical thinking, this really deserves close scrutiny. I'm very excited about this whole model because it explains so many anomalies that people are perhaps not aware of with the heliocentric model that we're used to. So without further ado, Simon, maybe you can give us a brief overview of this TYCHOS model for people who've not heard of it before.
Yeah, sure. The TYCHOS model is I base it on the model that Tycho Brahe, or we pronounce it Tycho in Swedish. But anyway, I'll call him Tycho Brahe for the English listeners. Tycho Brahe was a Danish astronomer who looked at the stars for all of his life. He was he had an island with a castle on an island. He was friends with the Danish king at the time, and he had lots of backing to make the best instruments ever made. And he spent most of his life looking at the stars, and he came up with a model which had the Sun and Mars, the orbits of the Sun and Mars intersecting. And that model, mind you, was accepted for at least 100 years after his death. It was the ruling model in Europe for at least 100 years. Even though the Copernican model already was, circulating, but the Tychonic model, as it's called, is now forgotten. No one remembers it anymore, but it was the ruling model for 100 years. So it's not like I've, made up all this myself. I'm basing my TYCHOS model on Tycho Brahe's solar system configuration, which had, as I said, Sun and Mars intersecting. The orbits of Sun and Mars are intersecting. At the time, no one had ever seen. They didn't know about the existence of double stars, of binary stars, which are in fact a big star and a companion revolving in intersecting orbits. And now today we know that at least 90% of all the stars we have in the sky have a companion. So the first question must be, why would our sun not have a companion? It is the main absurdity of the Copernican model to say that the sun is the only single star in our skies, because all around us, 100% of the nearmost stars are doubles. The thing is that they say that only 85 or 90% are doubles, but the remaining 15 or 10% may just be, they think they're single stars because they still haven't found the companion. I'm saying that I'm proposing and postulating that all stars in the skies have a companion. So if that turns out to be true, then the Copernican model is dead, because why would the sun would be the only single star? So what I'm saying is that Mars is the companion of the sun. And when I started thinking about this, I was curious to see whether, I looked at Sirius. Sirius is the brightest star, absolutely brightest star in our skies. And, they discovered in the 19th century that Sirius had a companion, which they now call Sirius B. But it's so small, it's such a small thing that it's very hard to see even in the best telescopes, but it's there, and it has been determined that it revolves around the big mother, Sirius A, and they just revolve around each other in intersecting orbits. So the next thing I did was to look at the size of Sirius B, and I found that Sirius B is 205 times smaller than its mother, let's call it that. So I found that it's 205 times smaller than the Sirius A, and then I looked at Mars and the sun, and I found that Mars is 205 times smaller than the sun. So right there and then I thought, wow, this is an amazing coincidence, isn't it? Well, it was very promising for my theory, because the first thing people objected when I first came up with this idea, they said, no, Mars is such a small thing, it can't possibly be the companion of the sun. The sun is much bigger. But we know, we can see in our best telescopes that there is a system called Sirius. It's the brightest star in our skies, which has a companion. So, and they are proportionally identical, which is, in itself an amazing thing. No one has, I haven't read this in any book. I actually discovered it for myself. I just went to see, what, I'm talking about the diameters now, okay? The diameters of Sirius A and Sirius B are identical to the diameters of the sun and Mars. Okay, so let's talk about the sun. The sun is, they say that the Copernicans, okay, the Copernicans, the academia today, they are saying that the sun is stationary in the middle of our system. It doesn't have a local orbit. Its orbit is the orbit of our whole solar system, which would take 240 million years to be completed. So the sun does not have an orbit. But all of the stars, again, I repeat, all of the stars we have in the skies have small orbits. They can be, they could take 29 years, like, or 50 years, like Sirius A and Sirius B, or they can take even months or weeks to be completed, the orbits of these binary stars. In our case, I'm saying that the local orbit of the sun lasts for 1 year, 365 days. It is the sun that revolves around us, not the other way around. The sun rotates around its axis. Okay, we have been able to see that. And an amazing thing I also found this much later, that there is something called the Carrington number, and that's the time that the sun actually is viewed from Earth to rotate, and that's 27.3 days. And 27.3 days is the same period that the moon employs to go around Earth, which is amazing. Our moon is, how can that be? If our moon is just a small appendage of Earth, which should be the third planets rotates around the sun, why would the moon have such an incredible resonance with the sun's rotation? 27.3 days is the same period that the sun rotates around its axis and that the moon revolves around Earth. I think that's very fascinating. Then let's go to Mars. Mars is probably a red dwarf. It's reddish, you know. Even amateur astronomers can see it's orange, reddish. And the most common stars in our sky, everyone agrees with that, are red dwarfs. And red dwarfs can be so dim that they are invisible. So Mars is, you know, it doesn't shine with its own light. You know, the people, another objection, they would say, but Mars is a planet, it's not a star. Well, we have to maybe start thinking, what are planets and moons and stars? We have to redefine this. A new school of thought that says that all of the bodies in our cosmos are stars at different levels of their evolution. So you have older and younger stars.
Stellar metamorphosis.
Yeah, the
right?
stellar metamorphosis.
Yes.
Stellar metamorphosis is this new school of thought that's some researchers are modern researchers are talking about, and it makes sense that, you know, even maybe Earth was a star. So all of the objects in our skies, we can call them stars. But for one exception, we should call moons moons, because the moons have a particular behavior. Our moon shows always the same face to us, okay? And so does Venus and Mercury. And in my TYCHOS book, in the first chapters, I talk about Venus and Mercury, and I call them the moons of the sun. Why do I do that so confidently? Well, because this is also something, now we get into the new things I have published in my new book, the second edition. I have actually discovered, thanks to the TYCHOS simulator that Patrik has helped me do, we have done a fantastic simulator which helps us understand day by day the system. The TYCHOS shows now that we have, you know, regulated all the tilts and you know, the orbits, you can actually see with your own eyes that Venus and Mercury, their orbits are tilted equally by 6 degrees. And what is 60 degrees? 6 degrees is the mysterious tilt of the sun, which is a mystery for modern astronomers. They admit it. They don't know why the sun is tilted by 6 degrees. Well, Venus and Mercury, which I call the moons of the sun, their orbits are tilted, you know, they are coplanar with the sun's equator. You understand? They are always going around the sun in a certain tilt, and they are the only planets that do that. Also, Venus and Mercury have no moons. Why they don't have any moons is another mystery. Well, I'm just saying, I'm simply saying they have no moons because they are moons. And you can read on Wikipedia that no moons have ever been found around any other moons. That they don't exist. There are no moons around, you know, the moons of Jupiter or the moons of Saturn. So a moon cannot have a moon, which makes my contention that Venus and Mercury are the moons of the sun quite, you know, solid. So that's my brief overview of, you know, my first book actually, and maybe I should give the word, pass the word to Patrik, who would like to describe one very important subject, which is the retrogrades. Over to you, Patrik.
Yes, let me see if I can share my screen here.
Yeah.
Do you see the TYCHOS.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Because I mean, suggesting a new model of the solar system isn't an easy task, and we have to be able to by ourselves. I mean, Simon has done such a brilliant job for many years now in explaining this in his first edition of the TYCHOS book that you can buy at Lulu, get a hard copy. And now he has done a complete rewrite of the book. And the only place we need to remember to check out TYCHOS and when we think about it is TYCHOS.space. That's a new website that we have built. So if you go to TYCHOS.space, you have two things you can select. You can go to the TYCHOS book. And if you want to go there directly, you just type book.tychos.space and you get there as well. And you can read the book. And as I said, it's a complete rework of the previous book, but it's called a second edition. And and here I think that is good to know as well. There is a dark mode and a light mode. But I mean, we have limited resources here. We are two people working on this on spare time, so everything isn't perfect. But it's very readable now, I think, and it's fast and it loads quickly. So that's the first part of TYCHOS+space. And then we of course have the TYCHOSium, which is an excellent companion in studying this model and thinking what makes sense and what makes not. Because here you can see everything move as Simon suggests in his model. And as they say, a picture. So this is a simulation of the system. And if we look here up in the right corner, we have everything. We can just type in a date here if we like to. And you saw the planets move, and we can click at today. And this is the positions the planets will have today. And we haven't. I mean, this is still in a working stage. We are working on improving and making labels for planets and such. But here we have Earth and the Moon, of course, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, Mars, and if we zoom out, we also have Jupiter and Saturn. And then if you click on Run here, we can see how things move according to the TYCHOS model. And what we immediately notice, of course, is a very different thing compared to the current model. And that is that the sun is moving around the Earth and not vice versa. And this was as you mentioned, Tycho, this was what Tycho Brahe suggested, and that was a very popular model. And the reason why it's so popular because it works so well. I mean, on paper it looks a bit complicated. I mean, I have three. If we look at these three and compare previous models, here we have the model that was the ruling one up into the 15th, 16th century, the geocentric model, geo, Earth in the middle. And then we have the moon outside Earth, Mercury, Venus, and the sun. But they had some problems with this, of course, and I'll get to that later. And here we have the heliocentric model, the one we know, helio, sun in the middle. And it's like a geocentric model, but the sun is in the middle. And here we have Mercury, Venus, and Earth and Mars in neat circles around. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have Tycho Brahe's model that you have based your model on, but you have found a key that which we will talk later about. But let's go back and talk about that. You talked about the retrograde. And what is the retrogrades? Well, if we start TYCHOSium, and we have some nice functions here, you can trace every planet. And if I click on Mars here, you will notice that Mars gets a line after itself, and we can also have dots if we like that. And now here comes the retrograde, because Mars was moving one direction. Suddenly it's moving backwards.
Yeah.
And now it goes forward again. And this is what all the planets do. If I click in Mercury and Venus, you will see the same thing. And this is what we observe when we look at the planets from Earth. So this needs to be explained in a model. So what did they do in the geocentric model? Well, they had what they called epicycles. They stipulated or imagined that the planets were hanging on an extra ring in their orbits, and so they could move in this little ring and be able to move backwards at times. And in the heliocentric model, we have this explanation, that it's a combination of Earth movements and the planet movements, and it appears to move backwards against the stars. But as you go through very thoroughly, Simon, in your book, this doesn't work very well logically, but we'll get to that later as well. Mm-hmm. So, but if we look at the TYCHOS model, we have a very simple explanation. If I put away the traces here and we start running, because the TYCHOS model, as you suggest, planets aren't moving in epicycles as in the old geocentric model, and it's not, they are not moving in elliptical orbits at varying speeds as in the current model, the heliocentric model.
Right.
The planets are moving in circular orbits at constant speeds. Yes. And that feels very physically plausible, because that is something we can demonstrate. We can have magnets moving in these kinds of orbits. It's not hard to make an experiment where we can see this happening in nature, but it's very hard to make something move in elliptical orbits at varying speeds. I've never seen it, if you just apply a constant force and have something move like that. I mean, and I'm not talking about having something in a string, because I don't think the planets are hanging in some kind of strings and that are feathering. Anyway, and the difference, the thing here is that the TYCHOS models, and also what it's based on, the Tychonic model, is that they are not a geocentric model. They are a geo-heliocentric model. And what that simply means is that, yes, the sun is moving around the Earth, but the other planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter and Saturn, they are moving around the sun while the sun is moving around the Earth. And this solves the retrogrades so neatly without having to defy the laws of physics and make something move in a strange way. Then the planets can move at constant speeds in circular orbits around the sun, and this becomes the consequence. So if you look at Venus and Mercury now, you see that they are spinning around the sun while the sun is moving around the Earth, and then I have a rather high speed. 1 second equals 1 month here. And if we put on the traces here, we can see how they draw these patterns. And these are very well-known patterns. And if I speed it up furthermore, so we will see how they appear after a while. It may look nicer if I put on lines, and let's pause it here. And I will actually switch off Mercury and Mars. And here we have what's called the flower of Venus, or the rose of Venus. And that is a well-known pattern that this planet does when you look at it. So having a model like this, where the sun moves around the Earth while the other planets are moving around the sun, solves. We have a simple model with simple movements, but we still have what we observably see. Yeah. So I hope that makes things clearer, because I mean the thing about retrogrades, it's important to understand, but what it simply means is that sometimes the planets move backwards. But I mean, what you have exposed so elegantly also, Simon, is that the way they explain these retrogrades in the heliocentric model now, it doesn't work, and especially when we take the stars into account, because I mean we have the stars in the TYCHOS now, and I can put on the names there. It becomes a bit plottery, but could you talk a little about that, Simon? Is that okay, Nigel? I don't want to take over
No, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, well, if you can now on the TYCHOS you can set different reference frames, and if you put the reference frame on the sun, you will see that the stars would have to themselves, move in order to correspond to the actual observations.
That's an
try that.
interesting picture. Yeah, because I mean we have some helper. If you go to stars and helper objects, we can have something. We can have a zodiac where we have the star signs, and we can even put on the constellations. But let's switch on the polar line. And let's switch off the zodiac so it's easy to see. So what a polar line is, it's simply a line through going through the South Pole and up through the North Pole. And if we make this line a bit longer, like this, and we change the perspective so we start to look along that line, and what we will see is, of course, Polaris, because that's our North Star right now.
Yes.
And as we observably can see in the sky, the Polaris isn't moving. It's in the same position year round, and that's what it is in the TYCHOS model as well. So we can have it a little bit slower here. As you see, the sun is now moving around the Earth, and it's moving in the other way because we are looking upside down. We are looking up from the southern hemisphere. So it will appear to move in the other direction, and we see Polaris. Okay, but how would this work in a heliocentric model? And this becomes rather hilarious and absurd, actually, when we start to demonstrate this. What kind of problems the heliocentric model actually has? Because if I do as Simon asked me to do here, I put the sun as the reference frame, and we are putting the camera at the sun and having the sun in the middle in the model, and having the planets move. So see what happens now. Then, in order for this to work observably geometrically, then the stars, the entire universe actually has to follow Earth while it's moving around the sun. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could actually say, to be a bit, sharp, to say that heliocentrism is a very absurd geocentrism, actually, because the entire universe needs to follow Earth, the sun. I mean, but this is explained in various ways, but it's never demonstrated that it actually works geometrically. They say, oh yeah, because it's because the stars are so far away, we don't see this slight movement, and they have the annual parallax to hang things up in, that this still is. But let's talk about that later. The annual stellar parallax and the problems with negative and positive parallax, because that's really a big problem, because that's the proof the heliocentric school has that this is a correct model. But so I hope this explained a little. I mean, it's a big thing to get your head around this, but I hope having the excellent second edition of the TYCHOS book online, and having the simulator the TYCHOS to help when we study and think about it will help, and you can do anything you want with this simulator. You won't break anything. Just if you get lost, just click reload or reset, and you can start over again. We don't have any good instructions yet. I'm a bit sorry about that, but we'll get to that. But I mean, try everything.
Patrik, while you have your screen shared, could I ask you if you can go back to putting the Earth at the center again? If you could play around with the perspective of the plane of which all of the planets and the sun revolve, because I know it's a common question that people have that you know, if this TYCHOS model is correct, wouldn't the planets or things bump into each other? And I mean, if you could just change that in the TYCHOS, you can change that perspective so you can look at it flat, so that you can see in the actual plane of the planets going around. The sun
like
going
this from above, or
that's from above, yeah. But I mean, clearly we can see, as you've demonstrated, that you know nothing bumps into anything. This is the beauty of the geometrical precision of our solar system, isn't it?
Yes, nothing bumps into anything, and that was the you know, Tycho Brahe was ridiculed in his time by his peers, who thought that if Mars and the Sun have intersecting orbits, they must crash into each other sooner or later. But that is obviously not, you know, the case. They are just a binary pair, just like all the stars in the sky.
Yeah. And can you clarify one other thing, Simon? When you talk about intersecting orbits, you know, if you could zoom in a little bit, Patrik, perhaps, to show, so we can see the Sun and Mars, you simply mean that at different times, of course, they pass through each other's path.
Yes.
Is that what you mean by
yes,
intersecting?
Mars is the only, I mean, some objections have been, but isn't Mars just the third moon of the Sun? No, because Mars is the only one of these three objects, Venus, Mercury, and Mars, is the only one that can be on both sides of Earth. Whereas Venus and Mercury are always on the same side of Earth.
Right.
So Mars is the only one that can come in opposition, as it's called in astronomical terms. When Mars is in opposition, as in astronomical jargon, that means that Mars is on the other side of Earth with respect to the Sun.
Gotcha.
And Mars is the only one that does that. And here it is in opposition. Okay.
Yes.
So Mars is not a third moon of the Sun. The thing is that binary systems we have been discovering binary systems with telescopes far, far away, but we have never understood exactly how they work. You know, these intersecting dynamics, how they actually work. But Mars, you need to, I mean, some graphics that I've done explain it very well. Mars actually, and that's an amazing discovery I made later on in my in later years. I discovered that Mars, when it passes closest to Earth, it actually passes in the middle of Earth's orbit, which I call the PVP orbit. The PVP orbit is called this way because we are now under Polaris, P, and in half a turn we'll be under Vega, V, and then we go back to Polaris. So it's PVP, okay?
Maybe we can just delve into a little bit more of the PVP orbit, Simon, because as I understand it, it's the main difference, obviously, between with your update on Tycho Brahe's model, but it's a really, really key difference, bringing in this idea that the Earth slowly moves around its own orbit, taking 25,000 years or thereabouts to go around. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the PVP orbit, and also, very crucially, how did you come to hypothesize about this fundamental missing link of Brahe's, and how did you? Can you explain a little bit about that?
I was able to calculate the diameter of the PVP orbit, was that we know, I mean, it is known, all astronomers agree that we are now under Polaris, and we will be under Vega in 12,000 years, approximately. So that is a distance that if you use other simulators of the solar system, you can estimate the distance that the sun makes between a point. You can go on other simulators and see that Polaris and Vega are at a certain distance from each other, and it would take 44 days for the sun to cover that distance. And that is explained in my book. It's hard to explain here right now, but really that made me that enabled me to estimate the diameter of the PVP orbit, which is 113.2 million kilometers. Yeah. And as I mentioned before, Mars passes at 56.6 kilometers when it passes closest to Earth, which is exactly in the middle, exactly smack in the middle of the PVP orbit. So it all makes very much geometric sense, if you like. It's really an incredibly, it's a clockwork.
Can I interject with one point about the PVP orbit? And maybe Simon, Patrik, there you can sort of help us out with appropriate visuals. But you've mentioned that in this binary pair, we are or the TYCHOS model. According to the TYCHOS model, we are in a binary system with the Sun and the Mars orbiting around the barycenter. So is the Earth at that barycenter, sort of effectively a center of mass between Mars and the Sun? Is that correct?
Yes, the Earth is at the barycenter. I've been a bit timid to say that in later years because I wasn't quite sure that was the case. But what actually happens, if Patrik maybe can put on the other,
the other planets. Yeah, let me do a reset.
We are now seeing what Earth is doing in 25,000 years. Okay, we know that's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
But why is Earth going around in a clockwise fashion as seen from above the North Pole? Why is he doing this? Because the whole system precesses. And if you put Patrik, I would like you to put like 1 second equals 1,000 years. We have that on TYCHOS.
Yeah.
And then we will see what happens. And put the tracer on the sun. The trace on the sun.
Yes, I will.
That would be nice to see.
There we go.
Okay, so now 1 second equals 1,000 years. Okay. Now you see what's happening.
Yes.
What's happening is that the whole system actually precesses clockwise, and therefore drags the Earth around its orbit. But you could say that the Earth is immobile because it is just getting dragged by the actual precession of the whole system. So it's not. You could say that Earth has no engine. It's not really moving by itself. It's just being dragged by the precession itself.
Yeah, that's beautiful to look at it over time, isn't it? And to look at those amazing geometric patterns.
1 second equals 1,000 years here. And you know that yellow, you see the yellow pattern of the sun?
Yeah.
I had calculated that in my first book before TYCHOS was made. And can you imagine the pleasure when I saw that it was actually reproduced this way on the TYCHOS?
So Simon, what is it that gave you the idea that Earth must be rotating around it or being dragged around its own PVP orbit, taking the same amount of time that is attributed to the precession of the equinoxes, as you mentioned, or as one of you mentioned earlier, with the North Pole pointing to Polaris and Vega. What is it that gave you that sort of,
That's a difficult question to answer. There are many factors that made me arrive to this, but I was thinking that it was quite strange that, according to the Copernican theory, that Earth would instead wobble clockwise. Why would it wobble, in the opposite direction of its rotation and of its revolution around the sun? Its supposed revolution around the sun. I mean, it really doesn't make physical sense, does it?
No. But what I found most impressive about the book is that your creation, dare I say, inverted commas, of course, because it's not really your creation, but your idea to put this the Earth hypothesis of the PVP orbit, it so brilliantly integrates so many observed phenomena that you go through, very clearly in the book, and I recommend people give it a read and a look. There are so many of these so-called anomalies of things moving in strange ways. Bernard's star and the motions, the parallaxes and stuff. There are so many that the trochoidal motion. You say in the book, a man's actual motion as he goes around the Earth in a year or something.
Yeah, let me explain that.
Yeah, please,
Nigel. The trochoidal motion. I mean, trochoidal means just what we saw before with the retrograde motions. That's a trochoidal geometric motion. The retrogrades are a trochoidal motion. As we showed before, if you put the tracing on Mars is always ever going around in a circle, yet since it revolves around another revolving object, it will do this. Look at it now. It will do this thing here, this little loop here. But it's not changing its path. It's a geometric. It's a natural geometric path.
Yeah. And of course, it's easy for the uninitiated or those of us not familiar with astronomy, or indeed these sorts of geometrics, to forget that that Mars is just continually moving around the sun, and it's only the sun's motion which creates this.
It's nothing magical. It's nothing magical. It's quite natural if you just wrap your head around the geometry of rotational motions. And the retrograde motions are so important because the way the Copernicans explain these differently large. You see, this now it made a larger loop. Can you go faster, Patrik?
Yes.
So we can see that these loops are not quite equal. Okay.
Yeah.
They get larger and larger here. Oh, look, much larger. Okay. So you can stop it now. Now, okay, so we compare the smallest loop to the right of Earth, and to the left of Earth we have a large loop, okay?
Yeah.
But notice that the smaller loop happens. I mean, this is exactly what is observed, okay? That Mars retrogrades less when it's closest to Earth, and it retrogrades much more when it's farthest from Earth.
Yeah.
Well, this is completely contradictory to the basic laws of perspective. And let me explain then.
In the Copernican model, you mean, yeah?
Yeah, in the Copernican model, they say that, Mars goes backwards because when we overtake it, in the inside lane, it goes backwards. Yes, but hold on. It should be exactly the opposite way. When we are closest to Mars, the retrograde effect, optical retrograde, should be larger.
Yes.
And
basic parallax.
And vice versa. It should be larger when Mars is closest, but it is smaller in reality.
Yeah.
Which completely destroys the notion of retrograde motion in the Copernican model.
Wonderful.
Because it's the other way around. It's upside down.
But this is the case with every point that you make in every chapter of your book. There's something that blows the Copernican model out of the door, and it shows that everything observable is accounted for, in this TYCHOS model, which is just absolutely beautiful. Maybe we could take a look at, I think one of you mentioned it earlier, but the stellar parallax issue, which is beautiful proof once again of the PVP orbit.
What is stellar parallax? Stellar parallax is how astronomers look at stars, over maybe 6 months. They look at a star. They take a star, a close star, and it should. If we are going around the sun, this close star should move in relation to the farther stars. The stellar parallax is about looking at the close star, one of our closer stars, with respect to the farther stars, which are farther away. Well, if we were going around the sun, we should therefore move in 6 months laterally by 300 million kilometers. You with me? That's a lot. That's quite a lot of space. 300 million kilometers. So we should be able to detect this parallax. Yes. But what has happened? I mean, that was the biggest objection Tycho Brahe had to the Copernican model. He said, "Well, I can't see any parallax because at the time the parallax is so small. The parallax between the closer and the further stars is so small. It has been undetectable until the 19th century. Even with the best telescopes of the time, they couldn't see any parallax at all. But now they've started. Oh yeah, we can see some parallax here and there. Very, very tiny, extremely small. But the point is that." This was Bessel. I think it was Bessel who first discovered who first proved that there was parallax, stellar parallax. But the first parallax he discovered was actually negative. What does that mean? It was exactly unexpectedly the closer star moved in the wrong direction. It was negative. Because
so let's just explain that, Simon, that, I mean, there is no disagreement between us and mainstream astronomy or heliocentric astronomy, that there can only be positive parallax in a heliocentric model, sun in the middle.
Yeah. This graphic that Patrik has pulled up here is a conceptual graphic I made. Imagine you're in a car, okay, and you're going around the sun, as they tell us. If that would be the case, you would always see the stars in the right-hand side window, okay? You would always see the stars and in your left-hand side window, you would see the sun all the time, right? If we were going around the sun like this. Therefore, any parallax that you would measure of any nearby star, as you can see up here, nearby star, would have to be positive because we never reverse direction. We always go around this way, this anti-clockwise way. If the Copernican model was true. This is I'm showing what they are telling us here. They are telling us that we are actually doing this. We're going around the sun this way.
Yeah, but excuse me, interrupt. But just to be clear, I mean, the Earth is also the car is spinning a lot, rotating because I mean, Earth is rotating one.
But that's we have to conceptually imagine that it starts rotating.
No, but I mean, just to explain. So if you go up, if you look at the stars at 12 o'clock in the night, or then because then we rotate into the exactly same position as last night.
Let's say at midnight, all the time. This is the position of the car. Yeah. So they could always there can only be positive parallax in the Copernicus system, whereas the observed data we have is that 25% of the stars have positive parallaxes, the other 25 has negative parallaxes, and then the remaining 50% have no parallax at all. And what about that 50% that have no parallax at all? Well, it is shown in this graphic. Thank you, Patrik. This is the perfect graphic. Why don't 50% show any parallax at all? Why 50% of the stars don't seem to move at all against the further stars? Because we are going towards them or away from them. Simple as that. They will not move laterally against the further stars, because we are going either towards them or away from them. If you look out from your car, your back, rear window of your car, when you go away from it, some tree that's behind you, it will not change, in perspectively to the forest behind it. No parallax. And the same way, if you go towards the tree in front of a forest further away, it will not change laterally. Okay, so 50%, as is in all the catalogs, all the star catalogs have, and that's been discovered by other modern independent researchers like myself. That's been discovered, and Vittorio Goretti, an Italian, very, very, very esteemed astronomer, pointed out this, and he tried to contact ESA and NASA and never got any answer about this. And he died He died in 2016 without getting any answer for this. And he was a really, really absolutely proficient astronomer. And he looked at parallaxes of many stars, and he found that the stars were, according to him, much closer than we are told.
The basic spread explains it all, doesn't it? Roughly half in front and behind, and the other two either sides, roughly 25%. I mean, it's a done deal. I think we have to remind ourselves that observations would be taken at precisely the same time every night. Am I correct in that? So obviously, you're always looking from the same returned point as the Earth spins. You couldn't just look up at the sky at any old time of the night, because obviously the Earth's moved and your whole perspective has changed. So is that a correct assumption?
Yes, and you also have to take into account what I call the man's yearly path, which is also trochoid. Yeah. Okay. Here, Nigel. Yeah. Look at this, Nigel.
Yes, that's the.
This trochoid, the white line, is what you are doing in 1 year. If you sit there in England, in London, which is my example here, I put this red dot here in March in London. If you sit there on your chair for a whole year, you will actually do this path. Okay? Yeah. This trochoidal path. So if you're an astronomer and you look at a certain star every single night, for 1 year, if you're that patient, you will actually see the star doing this. And that was what befuddled James Bradley. James Bradley was the astronomer royal. He became astronomer royal after he discovered this, and he said, yeah, this is absolutely unexpected, but I can tell you why. It must be because, it's stellar aberration. It's the aberration of light. He had to come up with an idea why this happened, because it's totally unexpected. And this, look at this. Observed motion of star Vega over a period of 3 years. This green trochoid is what Vega does.
Yeah. And that's caused by the motion of the observer rather than the motion of the
observer. The frame of reference is the observer, and that's why all the stars. Because James Bradley first looked at one star for a long time, but then he discovered that all the stars do this. All the stars do this trochoidal motion in different ways, because it depends on where they lie in the celestial sphere. Sometimes they are flatter like this, sometimes they're larger. These loops are bigger, but that's because we are doing this trochoidal motion.
I must just say, as a non-astronomer, and an appreciation to your work, Simon, that it's an incredible integration, a feat of integration of all this observed data. If we imagine that we exist in this 3D geometric lattice called our solar system in the universe, we've got all this observed data from all around us, and you've effectively sort of assimilated all of these sort of these aberrations, these anomalies, why does that move around? And these are all actually clues as to how the Earth is moving and how things are moving around it. And what I love about this TYCHOS model is that it integrates all and contradicts, nothing contradicts any observed data, and it integrates all of this information to model the exact way that things must be moving: Earth, Sun, Moon, planets, and it's just fantastic. And that's just my awestruck sort of impression as a non-astronomer. I'm getting more and more interested in astronomy, I must say, through this.
I'm not a very mathematical person, I've used just my spatial sense. I think, it's about what does it mean? It's like, the sense of orientation, when you are lost in a city and some people are better or worse at orientating themselves when they are lost in some place, in a city or in the woods. I'm pretty good at that. I know. Okay, I turned right here, so to my left now I have that castle I saw before. It's on my left, but apparently women are not very good at orientation. They get lost, but let's not get sexist here. But people have different capacities of spatial sense, spatial orientation, and that has helped me. And to understand this reference frame, that we should understand what our reference frame is. But of course, I could only have arrived at this after I discovered the PVP orbit. There was no way I could have come to this before that. So yeah,
I think you mentioned somewhere in your book, Simon, that the Copernican model is a triumph of mathematical abstraction over empirical evidence. Or I may not have got the words exactly right, but I think that's the gist of what you said. And I take my hat off to you, because you've actually managed to take all of the empirical evidence and mathematically abstract that into what I would say, or I'm personally convinced of, is the correct model. But I think a lot of newcomers to this idea will, even if the evidence of the simulator and all the rational arguments and the collated empirical evidence, I think, is overwhelming. I think the biggest struggle people will have is overcoming the sort of logical fallacies in their minds of being unable to detach from what everybody else thinks. And if we remind ourselves that almost everyone else on the planet believes in the Copernican theory, we have to acknowledge that is an amazingly powerful false, logical fallacy for so many people. They can't possibly accept that a new and challenging idea that everyone doesn't already believe in could possibly be true. And I think that's probably the biggest stumbling block for modern science and for these kinds of new ideas to be accepted.
Absolutely, it's the biggest obstacle. It's the biggest hurdle for people, to. I mean, come on, how can this guy, be, falsifying all this fantastic science that has been put in by so many astronomers over the years? I know that's an obstacle.
But isn't it beautiful the way all of these? So, Patrik, I don't mean to just one thing very briefly. The way, Simon, you've managed to collate all of the work done by all these people, and I think one of the chaps you mentioned in your book, was it Captain, who had the two different streams theory, the two different opposing star streams theory.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Which he spent a lifetime working on this, or a good many years, and he was rubbished for it. But in fact, he was what he was seeing, but he hadn't made the final final, conceptual integrations, he was just imagining looking out one side of that car window and looking the other side out the other car window in your previous analogy. And it's beautiful the way that you've managed to integrate all of these astronomers' work across the centuries, and it's as though all of them have sort of contributed in some beautiful way.
Yeah, Jacobus Kapteyn was this Dutch astronomer who is known to. He was the biggest star statistician that the world has ever had. Someone said about him that he controlled all the observatories of the world, because he actually used the data of all the observatories of the world to make sense of the motions of the stars. Okay, and he came to a conclusion. He had his own theory, which he called star streaming. He had discovered that, according to him, there was a stream of stars going one way on one side of the Earth and a stream of stars going the other way. And that was his conclusion, that there must be two star streams going in opposite directions on either side of Earth. Well, that is exactly what the TYCHOS would expect for someone who thinks that Earth is not moving in a straight line, because you have to understand that the PVP orbit means that Earth goes very slowly. So in 300 years, it will go almost in a straight line. It's not going to change much. 300 years of scientific observations will have Earth going in almost a straight line. We agree on that.
It's a very wide orbit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very wide orbit. So he was absolutely stupefied to see that on one side of Earth the stars were going one way, and on the other side of Earth the stars were going the other way, and that was not expected in the Copernican system. So he was saying the stars were going in opposite directions, but it was just an illusion. He was a very great guy. He certainly was absolutely, legit, and he made the best of all his observations, but he did not know about the PVP orbit. If you don't know about it, you will have to come up with theories that the stars are moving in opposite directions. But the PVP orbit solves it so easily, so readily. Yeah. It's because, of course, if we are going slowly, we are moving by 14,000 kilometers every year, 14,036 exactly. Then on one side, exactly here you can see, this is a good graphic that shows the concept. You will conclude, if you don't know that you're going in this from left to right here on this graphic, you will conclude that the stars are moving. No, you are moving. Yeah. We will now talk about the moon, if you will. Chapter 13, please, Patrik. Fantastic. So, this is a bit difficult to explain like this, but I'll try. The moon, we know, we have, astronomers have observed the moon for so many decades, and they know that the moon oscillates. What does it mean? The moon goes around us, okay? But sometimes it comes closer, which is called the perigee. When the moon is in perigee, it means when it's closest to Earth. And when it's in apogee, it means when it's farthest from Earth, okay? But do you know what they found out? That the difference between the closest perigee and the farthest perigee is 14,044 kilometers, which is almost exactly 14,036, which is the distance that the Earth covers in 1 year. But even better, the difference between the closest perigee and the farthest apogee is 42,108, which is exactly 3 times 14,036. So you have to conceptualize this in your head. It's because the moon is kind of, it's like it's a ring. The orbit of the moon is a ring that oscillates, around us, and this 3-to-1 ratio, which I've tried to illustrate here to make people understand, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, because 42,108 is 3 times the motion of an annual displacement of Earth. Well, it absolutely perfectly makes sense. This is why. And of course, it corroborates my own calculations of how much Earth moves in 1 year. Because otherwise it would be an incredible coincidence,
Yeah.
If you would say that this is just coincidence, I think you're a bit, really, you're really, then you're really pushing it,
But then you, Simon, you've then got to add in the 27.3 factor and multiples thereof, and then challenge
Right.
somebody to think that's a coincidence as well.
Right, yes. Well, I feel that you really read the book very attentively, Nigel. I'm happy about that.
I was so pleased that you wanted to go on to talk about the moon, because that was something I wanted to go into. I mean, this is a great point too, but don't let me stop you. Your flow.
No, the moon is. I think the moon is. I mean, the moon is really the most complicated thing, and all astronomers agree the moon has been a problem, the biggest problems, although it's the closest body we have. But the biggest problems have been caused by the moon for all astronomers, and they are still calculating all this, anomalies of the moon and anomalies. They're not anomalies. They're just anomalies because they don't know how the Earth-Moon system is moving.
Yeah. Anomalies when looked through the eyes of a Copernican model, and yet when viewed from the TYCHOS perspective, it all fits.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the 27.3 day moon's sidereal period, I think it is, versus everybody thinks of 28 days, all lay people think, well, moon cycle 28 days, women's menstrual cycle and all this sort of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about why 27.3, why that difference, and is that due to the same PVP orbit? And then maybe, this, I was fascinated to hear that for every turn of, or the motions and rotations and movements of the other planets and celestial bodies seem to be all round multiples of the moon's 27.3 day.
Yeah, no. Not of the 27.3 days sidereal period, but of the 29.22 synodic period. Synodic. You have to distinguish these two periods. 27.3 days is the period that the moon returns facing the same star. Okay? Whereas 29.22, well, actually 29.5 is what is observed, that the moon returns facing the sun. Okay. But the 29.20, slightly shorter 29.22 periods is explained in my book. This is very hard to explain here in words, but it is actually the proper average of the moon's synodic periods. So that's my discovery, humbly speaking, that these 29.22 periods is an important period. But the Maya astronomers knew about 29.22 because it's a multiple of Venus, exact multiple. 29.22 multiplied by 20 is exactly the Venus synodic periods. Okay, 584.4. So that started, bang, something in my mind. And I said, wait, let me see if, according to the TYCHOS, maybe the moon is the central drive shaft of all the planets. And sure enough, it turns out that the moon's synodic period of 29.22 days can be multiplied by 4 and you get Mercury's period. By 20, you get Venus's period. By 25, I'm talking about integer numbers. By 20, by 25, you get 25 is Mars, 150 is Jupiter. So 29.22 is the period that, I call it the TMSP, the true moon synodic period. The true moon synodic period. And that's 1, okay? If you multiply it by, look at here to the left, by 25, you have Mars's period. If you multiply it by 4, it's Mercury's period. By 20, it's Venus' period. By 375, it's Saturn's period. By 150, it's Jupiter's period. By integer numbers. It's a clockwork. The whole thing we are living in is a clockwork. Do I know why? No, I'm not pretending to say, I'm like a godlike mind that knows why this is happening. But it seems to me that this must be something magnetic, some magnetic resonance. There is no perturbations. They're always talking about perturbations because when they look at from a Copernican perspective, there are always some small variations. But these variations are explained by the TYCHOS. Yeah. The small variations. There was a big discussion in the 18th century or 19th century about, they called it the great inequality. And that was about Jupiter and Saturn not meeting up, properly in the right time, and actually they seem to be behaving chaotically, But that was just because they didn't know that we were moving in this straight line, as I call it, So in certain periods, Jupiter and Saturn would meet up a bit skewed, and in other periods they will meet up on the other side of Earth a bit skewed, and they couldn't figure out why. But that's just a very simple question of perspective. Because Jupiter and Saturn will at times be on one side of Earth and other times on the other. You see, Nigel, at some, the great inequality is explained by this one graphic. You see that Earth is moving on the left-hand side. You see, in 60 years, Earth will be moved. Okay, the proportions are not exact here. It's it's conceptual. Okay. Yeah, but anyway, let's say Earth moved by this much in 60 years. Saturn is slightly ahead of Jupiter. You see, and then after 60 years, now Jupiter seems to be ahead of Saturn. Jupiter must have accelerated. Okay, and then on the right hand side, the opposite will happen, because if Jupiter and Saturn conjunct on the other side of our Earth, the opposite will happen, and that was a whole that triggered an enormous controversy among the biggest astronomers of this world. Why? Because they were saying actually that if this is going on, Jupiter might crash into the sun and Saturn might vanish in the depths of space. That was a big discussion at the time.
So many of these observed phenomena are adequately explained, rationally explained, sensibly explained, one could say. And now, thanks to Patrik and the TYCHOSium, or thanks to you both, in obviously teaming up together to present us with this model, and we can actually see it. It's just fantastic. I'm most in awe. It's interesting because I part of what this channel and what my podcast is all about is presenting empirical evidence and rational arguments to demonstrate truth, and I think it's very important for people to place a very high reliance on looking for the rational argument and to try and let go of our previous assumptions, because as you've pointed out, Simon, all of these astronomers across the centuries including everybody, all the ones today that hang on to the Copernican model, are all tenaciously hanging on to an assumption. We didn't talk about the distance of the stars, but stars at distances are estimated assuming this huge orbit of the Earth around the sun, and measuring that as their baseline for calculating the distance. And of course, as you point out, with such a tiny actual movement, the movement of the so my point is not to dive into another chapter of the book, because I think we're running out of time. But the point is that we have to be brave enough to question assumptions, whether we're dealing with medical issues or terrorism issues or cosmological issues. We really have to be prepared to when the empirical evidence says this doesn't fit, we really have to keep going down and digging deeper to check what assumption can we check next. We've got to keep going down until we find something that works. And what I love about this TYCHOS model is that you haven't been constrained by any assumptions, any false assumptions. You've dared to think, do you know what, let's start again from the ground up. Let's just look and see what the empirical evidence builds. So I just wanted to say that as one of the things I love most about this Tychosium, and it seems to me almost a certainty that this will become the widely adopted understanding of the functioning of our solar system, because it makes sense and it fits all of the empirical evidence. And to cling to any other model which has to fudge things into elliptical orbits and planets or moons like Mercury accelerating and decelerating by ridiculous amounts every few months, if we persist in this sort of behavior, then we're never really going to move forward. So
I think it's important. So many people are saying, yeah, but what does it matter if we are moving like this or like that? What does this matter? We have other problems to deal with in our world. We have wars and we have viruses and people are saying this. But I think that we have to go to the root of the problem that we are living in. We have been, I don't know if this is, on purpose, they have kept this from us. I'm starting to think that, yes, there is some kind of conspiracy here, that they have kept this knowledge from us. And I think we are starting to understand now that the powers that be, they don't want us to be well informed. They want us to be keep us in ignorance.
Absolutely, but I do think that the individual truth seeker, obviously, you refer to the mainstream narrative and the stories we're told, but us individual truth seekers, we always have the ability to dig deeper and question more and more fundamentals, and whatever the issue we're looking at, we have to prepare to really go to the bedrock, if we need to. And if we do, we can always invariably find the truth if we build things right up from the very, very first known principles. So that's one of the main things I love about both of you guys, actually, as rational thinkers. It's a great pleasure to hook up with two rational, evidence-based minds. So Patrik, did you want to throw in anything before we sort of bring things to a conclusion?
Thank you, Nadia. I would just like to make one final point.
Can you end your screen share so we can see you? Is that all right?
Well, I was actually wanting to use my screen share, so right. Because I know people. I mean, this provokes our cognitive dissonance, that this would be something to look into. And I think in one way we dismiss it. We say, oh, no, there's nothing to this. We have good planetarium, stellarium, and that. So I mean, there is nothing to this. With the heliocentric model works. Well, the point here is that this Tychosium, the point I want to make is that Tychosium is actually the first simulator that can join an orrery, planets moving, with the stars and make things fit as they observably do, that a planet appears in front or conjuncts with the star that it's observably do. So the thing is, I mean, we have Stellarium. It's a beautiful planetarium, and I use it a lot, but it's completely geocentrical. So here the planets are moving in relation to Earth, and I mean, it's based on observations and statistics, and so the planets are in their correct positions. But it's geocentric. You can't fly out from this and look at things from a bird perspective. And when we look at an orrery, where we see things in a helicopter perspective, the stars are not. We can't do anything, and we can't. Where is the stars? Well, it's just a backdrop. They never involve the stars in a Copernican or heliocentric orrery because it doesn't work.
Yep.
You can't have actual stars in a Euclidean space because you can't join these two, the stars and the planets.
No.
So that's the thing with TYCHOS, and I mean it's in a beta stage or an experiment, but I will work on improving this so we can see this, that it actually works. I mean, I have been able to import the stars and put name on it, but of course we can make it much more attractive, as you see.
yeah. Just the names should be smaller, but graphical things.
It's a work in progress, isn't it?
It's a work in progress. But I just wanted to point out that, so don't dismiss it. Just give it a fair review.
No, Patrik, it's already so good. It's really the. I think it's also the most user-friendly planetarium that I know of, anyway.
We have all the positions of. We have right ascension and declaration here, so we can compare these. These are the positions in relation to Earth, astronomical terms, right ascension and declaration. So you can compare this with Stellarium and official and see that it matches up.
It kind of makes more sense, doesn't it? And the whole theme of this model of a solar system makes more sense in every respect. Every single thing you look at just looks more sensible than the Copernican, looking through the Copernican goggles version and twisting things around and coming up with silly ideas like the Earth wobbling once every 25,000 years in the wrong direction. Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, I'm aware of time, gentlemen, so I just want to thank you both so much for not only the time that you've shared with us today, but also for your work and for your approach and your commitment to reason and evidence and finding out the truth. I think it's fantastic, and I greatly appreciate your work, as indeed I'm sure lots of listeners and viewers will. So thank you both ever so much for your time. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Did you want to say anything in closing, either of you?
Yes, I would like to say the same thing to you, as you said here. Thank you for your work and commitment to logic and reason, because you really go down to the foundations, and that's really important, because, I mean, we need to learn how to reason around things, and we have never been learned that properly. It's like, we have been taught since we started school that modern science began when we understood that the Earth is moving around the sun. So it's very hard for us to reason around that, and it becomes amazing when you start to read the book, when you start to read Simon's book, because everything is referenced, all the astronomical history is actual, but you have never heard of it. You never heard of these controversies and problems within astronomy. Well, here they are, and the TYCHOS model solves it, actually. So, yeah. But thank you, Nigel, for your excellent work on how to think, and this is a good thing to think about.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say, Simon, I love this idea so much that I almost want to use it as a model exercise in logical thinking, but that's another conversation. Simon, did you want to say anything in closing?
No, well, I just want to encourage people. To not be afraid of reading this book. It's free online. You can do that, and not don't be scared about. Most people think that astronomy books are really complicated and over my head and stuff. I've done so many graphics because I almost wanted to do a children's book because that's how I like to communicate. I try to do it, I try to do a middle of the road thing with my book that appealed both to people who are versed in astronomy without, showing that I've at least I've done my homework, but also to make it easily readable. I hope I've achieved that. And so there are so many people that have never read an astronomy book in their lives because astronomy books are really boring. They're really boring.
Not
And
this one.
I hope that this is not boring because it's also very richly illustrated.
Yeah.
And that's how I conceived the book.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, it is an extremely accessible book. I hasten to add to anyone, and I would urge any rational thinkers to as well. Some people might address that problem of there are other things to think about, but do you know what? I think it's really important to know how we fit into the big scheme of things. And if you imagine a whole bunch of us just spinning around on this little blue-green planet, not knowing our place in the big scheme of things, how can we consider ourselves an enlightened race of beings? I mean, it's monstrous. And the fact that so many people still cling to the wrong model, and I'm personally convinced that the Copernican model is wrong. And it seems tragic that we don't even know how we fit in with our solar system. And there's no excuse for it because we've got all the technology, the telescopes, and so forth. And now you're at TYCHOS to educate us. So I would hasten that I'd encourage, everybody to take a good look at this. So thank you so much for listening or for watching. If you've been watching one of the video versions of this, I do encourage you to visit the website, lawfulrebel.com. There's more there. The page associated with this podcast will be there for all of the links. So do check them out. And I do hope you'll join us again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Change you want to see.